Until crash number 84, we continue with the same group of self-taught pilots from the previous part. So main problem is always too fast downsizing or entering the sport the wrong way without any background. This pilot is flying an 8 meter Rapido 3 after just a few months entering the sport on his own. So of course a part effect of downsizing too quickly. For instance, it should take pilots many years to even think about flying an 8 meter speedwing. The main problem beside that, in my opinion, was choosing a landing area with not much safety margin. The pilot stated that he wanted to grab the sea risers but wasn't able to get them during flight. Everything happened fast and then he overreacted due to information overload, not knowing if he should stay in the rears or brakes. Still, trying to land with the rear risers while trimmers are closed is not ideal, so he should have stayed on the brakes to ensure a more precise contour. Beside that, a landing area like that is always very risky. If one person walks out or a kid runs into your path, or even worse, a car drives out of the parking, you'll hit it with no possibility to avoid. Everything happens too fast. Another takeaway I can give here is something I spoke about in one of the previous parts, which is the possibility to miss your rear risers when you try to grab them when things are getting fast, which happened here too and therefore should be trained regularly to build a muscle memory. Last note I'd like to add, which comes directly from Alexander from Pro Speedflying. Beginners should learn toggle control as their main tool to pilot the wing. Toggle piloting should stay their main piloting style for the first year of active piloting. So later in tricky situations they will transit naturally from risers to toggles as to more safe and comfortable mode. Nowadays a lot of pilots learn straight from beginning to pilot on risers, especially skydivers, which can get you in trouble. And one thing I'd like to add, that if you make just 20 flights a year, this does not count as your first year of active piloting, but I'd rather count it as 1 month of experience.
Oops, has anybody got a paper so I can leave them a note?
Same pilot from the previous crash. First thing I want to say here is pay attention to your camera mount inside of your backpack. The lines can get caught in it, especially on self-made pole attachments. I've already seen several accidents or takeoff aborts because of this. But since a lot of pilots, myself included, are still going to fly with it, my advice I can give you is to do it only if you have it attached in a very strong way. For example, on the proxy harness from Flare or Fusion from Level Wings, where you will find attachment points that are made specifically for camera poles, which will keep the pole fixed. The most dangerous thing is if the pole starts wobbling to the sides, which often happens when you try to fixate it in a regular backpack. Here we have the same problem as in the previous crash, not enough well-trained muscle memory to switch from toggles to rears. You can see he wants to close the trimmers and has to look for where they are positioned. That's not great on an 8 meter wing. Another dangerous thing which I mentioned in the previous part is closing or opening the trimmers close to the ground, as it might happen that one opens or closes just partially, or that you close one faster, which as you can see on an 8 meter wing will cause an immediate reaction and maybe loss of control or bump into the terrain if you're not ready to counter steer. Lastly, most likely due to previous information overload, he's still overreacting and not flying calmly. He sees the object already here, if not earlier, and instead of counter steering to the right, which he probably would have had enough time, he just goes into collision mode, immediately by putting the arms in front of his body and away from any chance to pilot the wing. To summarize the takeaways from the last 3 accidents of this pilot: don't enter the sport the wrong way or downsize too fast, especially not to extremely aggressive and small wings like 8 meters. Master piloting on your toggles first before approaching rear riser flying. Choose a landing area with more safety margin, where one simple variable like an outparking car or person walking out from it means an inevitable impact. Pay attention if you grab your rear risers or trimmers very close to the ground, as you might lose control over your wing and bump into the terrain. Camera poles inside of your self-made backpack attachments may wobble around and get caught inside of the lines, and in general we all push limits way more if we are filming. That's a well-known fact. Always fly with an emergency rescue, as you may misjudge wind conditions and face unexpected turbulences, which was the same pilot but in the previous part. Still the same pilot, so main problem is of course downsizing too quickly, or in general approaching the sport without any background. Not sure if he opens the trimmers now or if they were already open. Either way, if you don't know the terrain and your wing, such as how steep it will fly, I would always leave them closed on the first flight. He sees that he gets too much sink, and with all the stones in front of him probably just overreacts and panics. I may be wrong, but I'm pretty sure this was this pilot's first ever approach to speed flying and paragliding in general. This can end so badly, it's so dangerous. You should always learn how to take off and make your first steps into the air on a big and slow paragliding wing, as it's way more forgiving. You can see that the pilot is completely overwhelmed on this small wing and probably in shock, and she's shaking after her landing due to a complete information overload.
Ah, Bridget! Watch out! Brake! Steer! Steer! Well done! Steer! You're okay. You kind of stop steering for a second. Is that one of the scariest things you've done in your life?
Beside of always the same problem, which is downsizing too quickly and approaching the sport the wrong way, is that the terrain is not ideal to run, as there are high bushes that will inevitably make running very difficult and tripping becomes very likely. But at least on this type of underground, if you just trip, you probably won't hurt yourself.
Yeah, fuck that. Whew, it's dead.
Same here, it's difficult to run on these bushes, but still a lot better than the previous one. Probably just tripped, which can always happen.
It's just not taking off, eh?
He's playing with the wing and wind, which is always good to improve glider control. Not sure what happens after, but probably always the same main problem of information overload because of entering the sport the wrong way without any backgrounds, which we can also see on the bad habit of grabbing the risers. Your hands should always stay on your toggles, so you have control over your wing. Information overload due to a self-taught approach to the sport. We can also see that at the last moment he's turning left into the hill, which is usually not a good idea as the impact will be stronger. He should have just landed parallel to the terrain instead. Here we have always the same problem, trying to learn speed flying without background and by yourself. Wrong brake input and no control over the glider. This should really be trained on a bigger paragliding wing first to be safe, which is way more forgiving, and of course under instruction. This is me. I lost a ski during takeoff because I was distracted due to not having my right hand on the brake handle. I thought I can grab it during takeoff, but it was more challenging than I expected, so I was focusing more on taking that brake handle instead of watching my surroundings. Takeaways I can give you here is to always look for a proper pre-flight check. The landing with one ski was a bit challenging as I was on an 11-meter line which flares like forever, but I could have definitely entered slower and with less energy. At some point I lost my balance for a moment and instinctively put my left feet down, which because of the frozen terrain and the snow boots acted like an immediate brake and turned me to the left, getting the wing caught in that obstacle too. Looks like the pilot got too much speed and maybe even a bit of lift. He was not able to turn back around after a reverse launch. Here we have a soaring accident with mini-wings. It's possible that the top pilot saw him coming and maybe panicked or wanted to invert direction just to get sure. Definitely top pilot's fault, as he surprises the bottom pilot with a sudden maneuver, but still could have been avoided if the bottom pilot reacted in time and flew more to the right as soon as he saw the other pilot change direction. So even if you're in the right, always keep an eye on other pilots. This one is crazy. The pilot stated that he made a penguin launch and as he was going to sit back into the harness, he dislocated a shoulder. He didn't know what to grab with what and only survived because he was able to fly straight without diving into the ground. You can use this as a reminder to not downsize too quickly, as you will not be ready to react the right way when things start to go wrong. This pilot somehow managed to regain straight flight when being in very dynamic turns with just weight shifting and a dislocated shoulder. If something like this happens on an 8-meter wing and you downsize too quickly, you are 100% fucked. This shows that it's not only difficult to run and take off with high snow, but also that there can be sharp rocks covered under it, which I think he hit with his leg or knee if I remember correctly. This guy was soaring and was focused on his dog, so he probably forgot to pay attention for a moment. In addition, keep in mind that on a hill you have constant upwind, which generates lift. But as soon as you encounter a part that is interrupted, like this one, you not only start getting less lift, but it's also likely that it creates a Venturi effect in some scenarios, which means that the wind accelerates there. Already seen this happening a few times. When overflying an interruption of the terrain while soaring, try to gain some altitude earlier and pay attention not to fly too much on the backside. This was a close call. Not sure if that pilot wanted to murder him or what else he was thinking.
Whoa, 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 whoa! Dude!
Two takeaways from this video. First one is to always use a helmet, even or especially when ground handling. You don't hit rocks with your head while in the air, but only on the ground. Second lesson is that if it's extremely windy or stormy, even ground handling with small wings can become very dangerous. This pilot was flying an extremely small wing, a 6.5 meter Rapido. At the rate he was going and the inability to leave the ground, full stalling was probably the best call.
Wow. Fuck that shit.
Light tailwind with very sinky air combined with high snow is never a good combination. After his first step in the snow, the pilot has sunken completely and was left to a penguin slide. Not sure if it would have been better to stall the wing immediately, but luckily he made it out just in time by creating just enough lift applying both brakes. This one was an altitude misjudgment at the landing. Not sure why he switched to the toggles, as he could generate more lift and for a longer period of time by staying on the rears first, but still unlikely that he would have made it to the landing area. This is an altitude loss misjudgment after a barrel roll. Here's a quick reminder that I already mentioned in the previous parts, that while you're landing, to always have an eye on other pilots that may land at the same time as you, and best scenario would be to discuss landing plans in advance, as for who lands first and from which direction you're coming.
Oh. Oh, scheiße.